Hi, friends. Welcome back. I'm sorry it's taken me a few days to get back to this, but the semester started and gosh, I can hardly keep up. But I promise you I'm going to get all the way through this, make all these little reading videos, even if it takes me longer than I would want, because I'm excited to read this book to you and with you. So we're still in the portal, of course. We still got a little ways to go. And I will just begin where I left off. Perfect politics, she hooted into a hot microphone at a public library. She had been lightly criticized for her incomplete understanding of the Spanish Civil War that week, and the memory of it still smarted. Perfect politics will manifest on Earth as a raccoon with a scab for a face. Each day we were seeing new evidence that suggested it was the portal that had allowed the dictator to rise to power. This was humiliating. It would be like discovering that the Vietnam War was secretly caused by ham radios, or that Napoleon was operating exclusively on the advice of a parrot named Brian. Some people were very excited to care about Russia again. Others were not going to do it no matter what, because above all else, the Cold War had been embarrassing. Not just the ideas, but the genes. In contrast with her generation, which had spent most of its time online learning to code so that it could add crude butterfly animations to the backgrounds of its web blogs, the generation immediately following had spent most of its time online making incredibly bigoted jokes in order to laugh at the idiots who were stupid enough to think that they meant it. Except after a while, they did mean it, and then somehow at the end of the day, they were Nazis. Was this always how it happened? To future historians, nothing will explain our behavior except, and hear me out, a mass outbreak of ergotism caused by contaminated rye stores? Every time it was in the news, she had it again, the dream where her rapist was being nice to her. He was next to her on the bed and speaking quietly, and she understood that it had all been a misunderstanding, which wiped with an unbearably fine cloth something in the body away from the mind. At once that was gone, they moved together through the dream as the two closest people on earth, though no one she encountered understood, though mouths of friends and families fell open with soft shock when they saw her. The word toxic had been anointed, and now could not go back to being a regular word. It was like a person becoming famous. They would never have a normal lunch again, would never eat a Cobb salad outdoors without tasting the full awareness of what they were. Toxic, labor, discourse, normalize. Don't normalize it, we shouted at each other. But all we were normalizing was the use of the word normalize, which sounded like the action of a ray gun wielded by a guy named Norm to make everyone around him norm as well. When Caucasian blink.gif appeared, her eye traveled over it left to right as if it were 100,000 words. The little strings that connect human eyes and human mouths to human mouths tugged her along with the expression. She bounced her eyebrows, bobbed her head back on its neck, and blinked along. Sometimes she even made a sound that corresponded with the figure of movement, a hushed zoom or a whoop that rose and fell with the arc of the drama. It was no longer the embarrassing adolescent question of whether people saw the same color green. It was a question of what soft, formless, excuse me, Linda, what the fuck did you just say, played out in your innermost ear when the Caucasian man appeared in the portal and asked you to help him put on his never-ending play. Just this once more, please. You are the only one who could help him bring to life this masterpiece of universal feeling. Context collapse. That sounded pretty bad, didn't it? And also like the thing that was happening to the honeybees. Certain people were born with the internet inside them and suffered greatly from it. Tom York was one of them, she thought, and curled up in her chair to watch the documentary Meeting People is Easy. The cinematography is a speeding neon blear of streets and tilted bottlenecks and strangers, people breaking like beams through the prisms of airports, cowlicks pressed against cab windows, halls like humane mousetraps, ads where art should be, waterways gone blinding, a rich sulfur light on the drummer. It rains everything. The soundtrack blips through a fugue of interview questions, the same ones repeated over and over. Music to slit your wrists to. Every shot says the circuits that run through us go everywhere are agonizing. But then something happens. Tom York is holding the microphone out to the crowd that is singing the chorus of Creep in blunt buffalo unison, never missing a word. He shrugs. The tilt of his wrist says, look at these idiots, and maybe I am an idiot myself. Then he smiles, one cheek lifting into an apple in the gray fog, and it is a real smile trying to pretend it isn't. He begins to sing the final flight of notes, at first almost parodically, but then halfway through his voice bursts some constraint of bitterness and flowers into the real song. as big and as terrible as a tiger lily, and he has made it new, and it is his again. It defeats even the men calling out his name, on the verge of heckling, trying to steal him from himself. Tom, Tom, Tom. His skin is gone. He is utterly protected. He is the size of the arena and as alone as he was when he first discovered he had that sound inside him. He stands, squeezing the microphone as if it were the throat of what had hurt him, the rigid systems inside him blown, nothing more than a boy, wearing the only kind of shirt available at that time. I've never felt like that, he says later in an interview, his face washed back to its usual pink pain, about seeing that crowd of anonymous thousands on a hill with their lighters all flickering. It wasn't a human feeling. The Unabomber had been right about everything. Well, not everything. The Unabomber stuff he had gotten wrong, but the stuff about the Industrial Revolution had been right on the money. A reporter had once asked the Unabomber if he was afraid of losing his mind in prison. No, what worries me is that I might, in a sense, adapt to this environment and come to be comfortable here and not resent it anymore. And I'm afraid that as the years go by, that I may forget, I may begin to lose my memories of the mountains and the woods. And that's what really worries me, that I might lose those memories and lose that sense of contact with wild nature in general. Once she had gone walking through Washington Square Park with a woman she knew from the portal, with long, crisp, gingerish hair that fell backward from a Flemish forehead. The woman pointed out an old man playing chess. She said she always looked for him as she walked to work, but he had gone missing for a few weeks recently, and it was such a relief to see him again, sliding his sure white knights on the L, bringing a dry, rustling autumn to the leaf of his daily newspaper. Maybe there are people in this life that were assigned to watch over, they mused, and were comforted. But months later, she heard that the woman from the portal had disappeared, and no one would tell her how, where, why, or which green real park she could have walked through to watch over her day by day. CIA confirms Charlie Bit My Finger was one of Osama bin Laden's computers, also a file called ass, 4s's.jpg. There must have been something in the air, because for the last few years, we'd all been giving ourselves fascist haircuts, shaving the sides down to a clean, honest stubble, combing back the top with a snap of the wrist. It was visually witty because we all knew so much better now. After all, ideas are not attached to haircuts, are they? But all at once, and lifting tiki torches, the ideas were back as well, and wearing the same haircut we had thought to rehabilitate. We were not partly to blame, were we? Because those haircuts had looked really good. When the car plowed into a crowd of protesters at a Nazi rally, she was there. Well, no, she wasn't there, but her heart beat as though she were. It beat among its pack, racing and red and low to the ground. When the car killed a woman with the period-specific name of Heather, she knew a minute before her own mother did, maybe. And by the time she had all the facts, had pieced together what happened, where had the whole blue day gone? It had sailed into a face that saw the car coming, into a face that would now always be familiar, like someone who had been in her class. A voice shouting from the back of the room, does this administration believe that slavery was wrong? Each day to turn a single eye that scanned a single piece of writing. The hot reading did not just pour from her, but flowed all around her. Her concreteness almost impeded it, as if she were a mote in the communal sight. Sometimes the pieces addressed the highest topics, war, poverty, epidemics. Other times they were about going to a deli with a poor friend who was intimidated by the fancy ham. And we always called it that, a piece, a piece, a piece. Did you read the piece? It's there in the piece. Did you even read the piece? I wrote the piece. You know, I love to get on the internet late at night and argue, said her podiatrist, mindlessly playing with her first two toes. He was hopeless as a doctor, but she kept seeing him for two reasons. His office had a sign out front that said, cancer can affect feet. And his waiting room was decorated exclusively with pictures of the Ark of the Covenant. She spent long, blissful hours there taking photos over other patients' shoulders, the blueprints and attendant angels, the lid cracked to release that light of knowledge that first felt like loving sunshine and then melted your face off. When something of hers sparked and spread in the portal, it blazed away the morning and afternoon. It blazed like the new California, which we had come to accept as being always on fire. She ran back and forth in the flames, not eating or drinking, emitting a high-pitched sound most humans couldn't hear. After a while, her husband might burst through that wall of swimming red to rescue her, but she would twist away and kick him in the nuts, screaming, "My whole life is in there," as the day she was standing on broke away and fell into the sea. 16 times Italians cried in the comments because we put chicken in pasta. Everyone agreed that it was fine to make fun of Italians. Was Christopher Columbus the reason? a conversation with a future grandchild. She lifts her eyes as blue as willow ware. The tips of her braids twitch with innocence. So you were calling each other bitch, and that was funny. And then you were all calling each other bench, and that was even funnier. How could you possibly explain it? Which words and in which order could you possibly utter that would make her understand? Yes, bench. All right, I'll stop there for today. It's so, diagnostic of a present moment. And you can see that she's thinking about how does the internet get us to the political climate we find ourselves in, or does it? How connected are those things? And what happens when everything kind of becomes just meaningless style or meaningless content with no underpinnings? It's like the part about the haircuts. So yes, stay tuned for the next installment, hopefully before too long, and take care out there.